Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Keelan and welcome to part 2 of my stylized character tutorial series. If you didn't complete part 1, then go ahead and click the link in the description, or there should be a little card somewhere up in the top right. But if you did, congratulations, you've leveled up. Welcome to part 2. You are soon gonna have the skills to pay the bills, as they say. So in part 2, we are going to go ahead and model the rest of the body. We're going to do the arms, the legs. We're going to learn a couple of interesting techniques that I like to use when I'm creating these for my web design projects and for some clients. So with that out of the way, let's load up Blender, get our project back to where we were, and jump right into the video. Okay, so let's move on to doing the rest of the body. So the first thing I'm going to do is ensure that we have everything parented to the head here, because if I move it right now, it's like, oh my goodness, what's happened here? So just highlight everything by clicking and dragging, and then go ahead and shift click on the head, then press Ctrl P and do object keep transform. Then if we move the head now, you can see everything is nicely attached to the head and we're not going to have any problems. And because we parented all these objects to the head using the keep transform option, we can actually go ahead and shrink this down a little bit, because it is really large right now, and playing with lights with really large objects can be a bit of a pain. So just shrink it down a little bit, and then I'm just going to move this up just so we don't have a huge gigantic object in the scene. But hey, if you've got a computer strong enough to do big shapes, you do it. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm going to click on the neck here, press Ctrl S and do cursor to selected, and then we're going to add in a shape for the body. So let's do Shift A, apologies, and add in a UV sphere. I'm going to go into my front view and scale this down just to a decent value, and then GZ to bring this down to the base of the neck. Then I'm going to go ahead and jump back into my solid view here, just so we don't have to deal with all the colors right now, and then tab into edit mode on our UV sphere, Shift Alt Z to go ahead into X-ray mode, and I'm going to highlight everything down to around here, and then using GZ we're going to move these down, and then we're going to go ahead and use S to scale to give him a little bit of a larger hip line or waistline. But hey, you can make, you can give your character any sort of stature you want, but I think I'm going to be happy with that one for now. Okay, so let's move on then to doing the arms. So what we can do is go ahead and adding another UV sphere, and you'll find I use UV spheres for a lot of things in these designs because they're just nice to work with. And then I'm going to shrink it down and then use R and Y 90 degrees, just because I want to make sure these lines across our sphere here are horizontal, because I'm going to, just like we did with the body, I'm going to use these to drag out and create those shoulder t-shirt sleeves. So drag it to where you think the shoulder would sit. Then I'm going to go into edit mode, into X-ray mode, and then drag this out using G and X. Okay, and I think about they will do. And to get a nice flat edge, what we need to do is I'm going to highlight all these except one row here, and press X and delete vertices, and now we've got a nice flat edge here. But of course we don't want it to have a hollow face here, so I'm going to go back into edit mode, press 2 to go into edge select mode, then while holding Alt click on this entire loop and press F, and that's going to fill the face here. So now we've got a nice sleeve, let's say. Okay, and then what are we going to do now? I'm going to insert a bunch of loop cuts in here. So back into edit mode, press Ctrl R, and then hover around here to get this nice loop cut. Scroll your mouse wheel up, say around 4 times, click, and then right click. And that's just going to go ahead and give some extra cuts so that when we add some modifiers later, we keep that definition. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good to me. I think what we can go ahead and do now is add a modifier. So go into the modifiers here, in the drop down find the mirror modifier, then click the pipette tool here and click on the body, and this is going to mirror across the body, so we don't have to go ahead and manually implement another shoulder over here. Alright, great stuff. This is looking good. Now let's move on to the arms, shall we? So first thing I'm going to do is, so if I click on our modifier here, if I click on our mesh here, you can see that this little dot is the center of origin, and it's at the center of where the sphere once was, but we want to move it to the center of it here, just so we've got the new center. So all we have to do is go into Object, Set Origin, Origin to Center of Mass. This is now going to find the new center, and I'm only doing this because I want to click on our mesh here, do Shift S and do Cursor to Selected. So I just want to make sure that my cursor is right here so I can extend out a nice arm that we can play around with. So now I'm going to do Shift A, and we're going to go down to single vert and add a single vertice. Now just like in the last tutorial, if you don't have this, just come up into your edit, preferences, and if we type in extra shapes and extra objects, I think I'll have to double check. I'll leave the the prop one in the description, but just make sure you have all your extra meshes and extra curves and all these extra things enabled. Okay, and now with our vertex selected, you can see it's up here, vert, we're going to add two modifiers. Now I use these all the time. They're really useful tools and a useful technique for building up characters. You're going to add a skin modifier, and on top of the skin modifier we're going to add a subdivision modifier. And this is far too big right now, so I'm just going to press Control A to shrink down the skin modifier. Then I'm going to go into X-ray mode with Alt Z, go into my front view mode, and then make sure you have the vertex selected, because otherwise this won't work. And then we're going to press E and X to extrude this out. I'm going to highlight both of these, cut, and then press Control A again just to shrink these down a little bit more, just so they sit nicely within the sleeve. And in order to do the rest of the arm, all you need to do is keep extruding out this vertex here. So to get that zigzag shape, I'm going to do EZ, bring this up here, EZ again, EX, sorry, to bring that across, EZ, EX. But of course, if you wanted something a bit more normal looking, go ahead. I just like to create something that's a bit unusual and just interesting to look at. And something else you can do here, you can see where it's sort of kinked. It adds an interesting style, but if you did want a more smoother line here, all you have to do is, so I'm going to go into front view mode, I'm going to select all the vertexes on angle points, and then we're going to press Control, Shift and B. And then this is going to let us bevel these vertexes, and you can scroll your mouse wheel up depending on how much, of a smooth curve you want, to increase the amount of extra vertexes you put in there, and this will really give you a nice shape. And I'm sure you can imagine you can use this tool for pipes and snakes and lots of different objects that you could imagine. So it's a really good technique and something I don't see used too often for piping. People tend to use the curves, whereas I think adding a skin on a bunch of vertexes works superbly. Okay, and that looks very interesting. And then we can go ahead and do a hand. So I'm just going to go into top view, back into X-ray mode, and I won't go too in depth on hands because I've got a tutorial series specifically for hands, but I'm just going to go ahead and mark this as loose. And then we're going to extrude out 4 digits. Then I'm going to shrink these down. So highlight them all, Control A, just to shrink them down. And this would be the thumb. So let's go ahead and extrude this out here. Then move this down here and extrude this out for 1 finger, 2 finger, and 3 finger. And just like that, we have a stylized hand. Now you can play around with that to your heart's content. Give them 4 fingers, 3 fingers, 2 fingers, no fingers whatsoever. But to keep it very basic, minimalist and stylized, let's keep it just like that. Okay, so then we can go ahead and apply our skin, which now turns this mesh into an editable mesh. And then let's go ahead and do a click, right click and shade smooth, get a nice smooth appearance. And then we can go ahead and also add in another mirror modifier. Go to the pipette tool, click on the body, and there we have two very interesting looking arms. What you might want to do to make it less symmetrical is apply the mirror modifier tool, click on our arms, tab into edit mode using tab there, and hover over one of the arms, press L, and then just do R X 180. And of course you can bring this down to make sure it lines up properly. And there you have two things that they look a bit strange, but at least they're not, you know, too symmetrical. And hey, if you wanted something more normal, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and make them a bit more normal shaped. But let's move on to the legs now. And I'm going to go ahead and go into front view mode. Shift. Actually, yeah, shift, right click here maybe. Actually, I kind of want it right in the center, so shift S, cursor to world origin. And then in front view mode, just press Shift A. We're going to add in a cylinder. We're going to go ahead and use S to scale this down, and then SZ to make this taller, just like a leg would be. Then in terms of height, that's completely up to you. Remember, just because I'm making a character that looks like this, doesn't mean you have to follow this tutorial to the T. You can go ahead and put your own touch to it, make something a lot more interesting and imaginative than my design. So down here now, I'm gonna go ahead and initially just apply a rotation scale just as a precaution. Then I'm gonna press 3 to go into face select mode, click on our face, press I to inset, and then EZ to extrude this down. And what I'm making here is the ankle of our character, just very straight, stiff, and, you know, sort of minimalist, I suppose. And then we're gonna do the shoe. So in order to do the shoe, I'm gonna go ahead and click on our circle here, our face, press Shift S, cursor to selected, and I'm just gonna add in a cube. So I'm gonna press Shift A, add in a cube, and now right now it looks a bit ridiculous. Oh, I can also see I've added it in edit mode. So what I want to do here to make this separate is tab into edit mode, hover over our cube, press L, P selection, and now this is a nice separate object for us to play around with. So initially press S to scale this down. I can see our origin point is a little off too, so object, set origin, origin to center of mass, GZ to bring this down to around about where your shoe would fit, and now just play around with your scale until, and your positioning to get something a bit more shoe sized. SX to thin this out, and then we'll add a bit more definition to get something a bit more shoe shaped. So in order to do so, I'm going to go ahead and add a modifier called the subdivision surface modifier. We've played with this over and over again. Increase our viewport and our render, and then tab into edit mode, and all we need to do is add some extra loop cuts to tell the subdivision surface modifier to, you know, keep a bit more shape here and there. So initially Control R along the center. I'm going to bring this back, and then maybe one here, around here, then on the side. So Control R, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel up once, and click or right click to keep this centered, and then you could do SX to bring this out to keep it a bit more squared off. And then let's drop the front a little bit here, so I'm going to press 2 to go into edge select mode, click all these edges on the front, and then GZ to bring these down, do the same across the center, GZ, get something a bit more shoe shaped, and maybe on the back here. But of course, remember guys, you know, you can go ahead, play around with these to your heart's content, and make something a bit more lifelike. I'm just trying to get the general shape here. You know, you can play with these things for hours, but I just literally want a basic shoe shape for the purpose of this tutorial. Okay, that's looking interesting to me. Now let's go ahead and start smoothing some things over, and then we're going to duplicate the leg across here as well. So let's do that first actually. So I'm going to click on our shoe, hold shift, click on the leg here, then press Control P and keep transform, then highlight both of these, look at it from the front, just press Shift D to duplicate, X to lock to the X axis, and then just bring it across. You could also use the mirror modifier here, but I'm just going to go ahead and use the duplicate tool. Okay, cool. So now we have 2 legs, we have 2 shoes, 2 ankles, 2 arms. Now let's look to clean this up a little bit. So let's go ahead and add another subdivision to this body here to get a bit more of a nicer finish. And then click on the body, right click, shade smooth. And then we can do the same here. So we can go ahead and shade smooth, and you can see how we lose the edges here. In order to rectify that, all you need to do is come down to our object properties here, into normals, and click auto smooth, and that makes sure that we keep our edges. And you can also go ahead, if you wanted something really smooth, because if I zoom in you can still see these edges, go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier, and you can go ahead and, just like we did before, add in some extra loops to really keep this shape. And you can do the same on the front. So if I isolate this object briefly using /, you can tab into edit mode, press 3, click on this face, and go ahead and insert this face just a tiny bit, because the closer to the edge you are, the more distinct the edge will be. And this will just get a very smooth sort of appearance, which looks nice in renders. Okay, then / to bring everything back. Okay, that's looking good to me. We can go ahead and do the same here. So if I just, how will this look if I add a subdivision surface modifier? Okay, that's a bit much. So I'm not going to use a subdivision surface modifier here. I'm just going to right click, shade smooth, and of course do the same as we did before with your object properties and turn on auto smooth. And then when it comes to the foot, we're just going to right click, shade smooth, right click, shade smooth, right click, shade smooth, and then of course turn on the auto smoothing on this leg also. And then we're almost to the end of the design. This is looking really interesting to me. I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything up to the body, then hold shift, click on the body, and then do Control P and parent everything with keep transform. That way everything is nicely linked up for us to play with. And that's going to do it for part 2, but in the next episode we're going to go ahead and add all our colors, we're going to set the scene, we're going to add some lighting, and then I'm also going to touch on some basic settings that I like to use to make these renders look really pretty, really bright and vibrant for my web design or just application projects. And I'm also going to throw in a couple of little extra images to show you how I use these in my day-to-day designs. But until next time, I hope you've enjoyed. My name has been Keelan, and I'll catch you in the next one.